She tried to drain my father's entire 401k while telling him I was mentally unstable. She said I was jealous, emotional, imagining things. What he did not know was that she had already drafted a forged power of attorney and was preparing a home equity line behind his back. When I flagged the transactions, the case escalated beyond local police and into a federal financial exploitation investigation. March 12, 2024, 10:14 a.m. She cut the warehouse lock with bolt cutters, thinking I was in Atlanta. 8 minutes later, officers surrounded her. A year later, she was standing in court facing prison time for fraud and attempted financial exploitation. My name is Elise Carter, and this is how I stopped my father from losing everything before it was too late. Chapter 1. The Day She Brought Bolt Cutters. March 12, 2024, 10:14 a.m. My phone vibrated while I was sitting inside a small office at the Nashville Metro Police Department. "She is there," Caleb said the moment I answered, "and she brought bolt cutters." Detective Morgan Alvarez turned the tablet toward me. The live security feed from the warehouse filled the screen. A silver SUV rolled into the nearly empty industrial lot off Charlotte Pike. The driver door opened. Camille Rayner stepped out. 53 years old, perfect hair, perfect posture, my father's new wife. She glanced around the lot once, calm and unhurried, like she was early for a lunch reservation. She had no idea the floodlights were wired to motion sensors, no idea the silent alarm had already notified monitoring, no idea I was 10 miles away, sitting beside a detective, waiting. She opened the trunk and lifted out a 36-inch bolt cutter. If she cut that lock, she would not just be breaking into a building, she would be breaking into the only thing my mother protected before she died. Camille walked to the side entrance and tested the handle. When it did not move, she positioned the cutter over the steel lock. Inside that warehouse sat nearly $500,000 worth of restored mid-century furniture. Not inventory, not clutter. Inheritance. Assets. The kind of assets that change what financial manipulation looks like when someone decides to get creative. Metal groaned as she squeezed. And that is how this started. To understand why I was in a police station instead of at work, you have to go back to October of 2022. My mother, Margaret Whitfield, died 5 months after being diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. She was 63. She ran a restoration workshop for 24 years in a 3,000-square-foot warehouse in West Nashville. She specialized in mid-century pieces most people overlooked: walnut credenzas, teak dining sets, hand-carved cabinets from estate sales. She restored 57 pieces over 2 decades. She kept them all. She used to say, "Wood remembers the hands that care for it. Cancer does not." My father, Daniel Whitfield, retired from the United States Postal Service in early 2023 after 35 years of carrying mail in Tennessee heat and winter rain. My mother handled every bill, every refinance, every investment decision. My father loved her deeply, but he never managed the money. Without her, he drifted. 8 months after the funeral, he told me he met someone at a grief support group. Her name was Camille Rayner. She was warm, he said. She understood loss. She worked as an interior consultant. They married in June 2023 at the Davidson County Courthouse. 3 weeks after she moved into the house I grew up in, my mother began disappearing for the second time. The recipe box vanished first, the one with my mother's handwriting on stained index cards. Then the quilt my grandmother stitched in 1984. Then the framed family photos from the mantel. In their place appeared glossy portraits of Camille, professional headshots with soft lighting and curated smiles. One Sunday evening, I drove over unannounced. My father sat at the kitchen table, staring into a cup of coffee that had gone cold. "Do you notice Mom's things are gone?" I asked. He exhaled slowly. "Harper, please. She is trying to make the house feel like hers." That was Mom's house. He looked up then, irritation flickering. "You're overreacting. I need to move forward." My cousin Ryan leaned against the counter. "Uncle Dan deserves to be happy. You cannot freeze him in time." No one used the word jealous, but I felt it in the room. I was not jealous. I was watching. By late summer, something else started to change. Money. A new SUV appeared in the driveway, a weekend retreat in Scottsdale that costs over $7,000, a $5,000 living room set replacing walnut pieces my mother restored by hand. My father had a 401k worth around $212,000 when he retired. That account was his safety net. His Social Security benefits had just started that January. One afternoon, I saw a credit card statement half sticking out of the recycling bin. $7,200 to a luxury resort. My father had never spent $7,000 on anything that wasn't a roof, a vehicle, or medical bills. When I asked him about it, he smiled too quickly. Camille said it was an investment in our relationship. Our relationship, like it was a joint venture. Around that same time, Camille began asking about the warehouse. "So, exactly what's inside?" she asked one evening, swirling wine in a glass that used to belong to my mother. "Inventory," I said. "That's a lot of space for inventory." Her tone was light, her eyes were calculating. I told her the deed had been transferred into my name in 2021, long before my mother's diagnosis. It was recorded, legal, sole ownership. "Families should not keep secrets," she said later through my father. "That's not healthy." It wasn't secrecy, it was protection. A week after that conversation, I learned she had visited the property management office at the industrial complex, claiming to represent me and asking for duplicate access. They refused her. That was the moment something shifted inside me. This was no longer about decor preferences. It was about access, control, financial positioning. In October, I began keeping notes. Dates, purchases, conversations. Every time Camille drove slowly past the warehouse lot. I didn't accuse her of fraud. I didn't confront my father with theories about financial manipulation. I built a record. Because the one thing I never told my father was what actually sat inside that building off Charlotte Pike. Not just furniture, not just memory. It was the only asset my mother secured before she died. The one thing she quietly moved into my name because she understood something about my father that I didn't want to admit. On the tablet in the police office, I watched Camille press down harder on the bolt cutter. Metal strained. And in that instant, I realized she had stopped pretending this was about family. If she was willing to cut through steel for a warehouse, she would not hesitate to cut through my father's retirement next. Chapter 2. Follow the money. That was the moment I stopped thinking of this as a family problem and started seeing it as a financial threat. I work as a billing and compliance analyst at a private orthopedic clinic in Franklin, Tennessee. My job is to catch discrepancies before auditors do. I review clean codes, match procedures to invoices, and flag anything that looks like fraud before it becomes a lawsuit. Patterns matter. Once I started applying that mindset to my father's life, the numbers began lining up in ways I could not ignore. June 2023. A leather sectional delivered on a humid Tuesday afternoon. $5,400 charged to my father's card. A weekend retreat in Sedona. $6,870. 3 jewelry purchases in 2 weeks. My father retired in early 2023 with about $215,000 in his 401k. That was his safety net. His Social Security had just started that January. He was comfortable, not wealthy. Comfortable can disappear fast. One evening, I stopped by and saw unopened mail near the door. Camille was at the kitchen island scrolling through her phone. "Want me to sort these for Dad?" I asked. "I already handled it," she said, without looking up. Later, while taking out the recycling, I noticed a credit card statement sticking out of the bin. I pulled it free. $7,200 at Canyon Crest Resort. My father stepped onto the porch as I stared at the number. "You did not need to go through trash," he said. It was sticking out. Camille joined him. "It was a gift. We needed time away." "You needed $7,000 of time?" I asked. "Your father deserves joy," she replied calmly. Joy had an interest rate. Around that same time, Camille started asking more specific questions about the warehouse. "How often do you check on it?" "Every few weeks." Is there an appraisal on the contents? Why would that matter? Just curious. Her voice was casual, her eyes were calculating. A few days later, I got a call from the property management office in Franklin. A woman came in asking about access to your unit, the manager said. She claimed she represented you. Did she give her name? Camille Rhodes. Rhodes was my father's last name. We refused her. The deed shows you as sole owner. That was when the shift became undeniable. That night, I searched public records. Camille Rhodes. Previously, Camille Lawson. In Maricopa County, Arizona, I found a civil complaint from 2019. Robert Lawson, age 72, alleged that a home equity line of credit had been opened for $112,000 without his clear understanding. The case was dismissed for lack of documentation, but the number stayed with me. $112,000 tied to equity. I whispered the phrase out loud in my kitchen. Elder financial exploitation. I had seen it referenced in compliance seminars. Warning signs included sudden spending increases, isolation from adult children, pressure to leverage assets. My father checked more boxes than I wanted to admit. The next morning at work, I nearly submitted a claim under the wrong modifier. Jasmine caught it. "You okay, Harper?" "Yeah." "You do not make mistakes like that." "Guess I'm distracted." At lunch, I sat in my car rereading the Arizona filing. If my father signed the wrong document, he could lose the house he spent 3 decades paying off. That thought hit harder than any luxury purchase. That evening, I drove over again. My Aunt Denise was at the dining table with Camille, flipping through renovation magazines. "We're thinking about opening up the kitchen," Denise said. "It would really modernize the space." Camille nodded. "We could explore a small line of credit, smart leverage." "On what basis?" I asked. "On the basis that the house has equity," Camille said smoothly. My father shifted in his seat. "It might increase value." "Or increase debt," I said. Denise frowned. "You need to stop attacking her." "I'm not attacking anyone. I'm asking what the long-term plan is." Camille stood slowly. "You act like I'm a threat." "I act like I understand risk," I replied. My father's voice hardened. "That's enough." Later, in the hallway, he faced me alone. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "I'm trying to keep you from signing something you cannot undo." "You think she's using me?" I didn't answer. A few days later, I stopped by unexpectedly and heard Camille on the phone. "She's controlling," she was saying softly. "She keeps the warehouse keys like it's some kind of power move." I stood still in the foyer. "It's not even her house," she continued. "She just doesn't want to share." When she noticed me, she ended the call. "Everything okay?" "Perfect." That was when I understood the new strategy. Isolate the daughter, reframe concern as jealousy, gain influence over the asset holder. That night, my father called. "Camille feels like you're pushing her out." "Out of what?" "Out of the family." "I'm trying to protect you." "From what?" "From signing something you cannot undo." "You think she's using me?" I didn't answer. After we hung up, I opened a new document. Dates, amounts, attempts to access the warehouse, Arizona filings, conversations about equity. I wasn't ready to accuse her of fraud, but the pattern was tightening, and once a pattern tightens, it rarely loosens on its own. Chapter 3. What My Mother Knew. 2 weeks later, in November 2023, I drove to the warehouse alone. The industrial park in Franklin was nearly silent at dusk. Most of the units were dark, security lights humming above empty parking spaces. I unlocked my unit and stepped inside, switching on the overhead lights row by row. The air smelled like lemon oil and sanded wood. 52 restored pieces stood across 3,000 square feet. Teak credenzas, walnut dining tables, sculpted lounge chairs from the late 1960s. The latest appraisal placed the collection just under $470,000. Not sentiment, 6 figures. This was asset protection. whether my mother had ever called it that or not. I moved between the rows, fingertips brushing polished edges. Small labels in my mother's handwriting were taped discreetly under certain frames. Notes about grain, hardware, restoration dates. In the back corner, behind a long sideboard, I found 3-letter journals I had never opened. I carried them to a folding table and sat down. The first journal began in early 2021. The second covered most of 2022. The third ended in September of that year. I opened the last one. Her handwriting was steady at first, then thinner as the entries progressed. She wrote about chemo appointments, fatigue, how the workshop lights felt too bright some days. Then I saw a name, Lena. That was Camille's name before she married my father, Lena Corbett. My mother had written it 3 times in the summer of 2022. Strange call from Lena again, asked about Daniel. Late call, did not like tone. Checked phone records, number appears multiple times this month. My chest tightened. While she was in treatment, she had been checking my father's phone records. A few pages later, I found another entry. Transferred warehouse deed to Elise, June 2021. Recorded with county clerk. Daniel does not understand leverage. I cannot risk exposure. My name in her handwriting felt deliberate. Then the line that stayed with me. Daniel is not strong enough to see what I see. I closed the journal and rested my hand on the cover. She had seen something long before I did. The deed transfer in 2021 was not casual estate planning. It was strategic. She secured the asset before she lost the strength to defend it. She insulated it from inheritance disputes, refinancing schemes, and any power of attorney that might surface later. She prepared quietly. I imagined walking into my father's house that night, placing the journal in front of him. "You need to read this." He would skim the pages, then look up at me. "You are misinterpreting her fears." And Camille would stand beside him, composed. "Your mother was very ill. Treatments can distort perception." The doubt would spread instantly. A week later, I parked outside my father's house after dark. The living room lights were on. Through the window, I saw him laughing at something Camille said, his head tilted back the way it used to tilt when my mother made him laugh. The journal sat on the passenger seat. I could walk in and expose everything. Instead, I started the engine and drove away. The next morning, I scheduled a consultation with a property attorney named Grant Holloway in downtown Franklin. His office overlooked the courthouse square. I placed the deed and copies of the journal entries on his desk. "You are the sole owner of the warehouse," he said after reviewing the paperwork. "Recorded cleanly in 2021. No shared interest." What if someone tries to enter without permission? That would be trespass, criminal if forced. What if they present paperwork claiming authority? "You mean a power of attorney?" I nodded. "If your father signs a valid financial power of attorney, that person could access retirement accounts, apply for lines of credit, refinance property. It is common in estate planning. It can also be abused." And if it is abused, then you're looking at potential elder financial exploitation. Tennessee prosecutes that. The phrase felt heavier, spoken in a law office. "What about forged documents?" I asked. "It happens," he said, "especially when significant assets are involved." Significant assets. A warehouse worth nearly $500,000, a fully paid-off home in a rising Nashville suburb, a retirement account that required only a signature to access. On my way out, he handed me his card. "If anything unusual happens, call immediately." That afternoon, I called my father. "Has anyone asked you to sign paperwork recently?" I asked. "What kind of paperwork?" "Anything related to equity, loans, authority over accounts?" "You are still on this," he said, irritation rising. "Please just answer." "No, and even if there was something, I can read." "I know you can read. I just need you to read carefully." "You think she is trying to steal from me?" "I think you are trusting someone who benefits from that trust." He exhaled sharply and ended the call. That evening, Camille called me directly. "I hear you met with a lawyer." "I did." "For what reason?" "To understand my rights as sole owner." A brief silence. "You really believe I am trying to take something from you?"
I believe you attempted to access property that is not yours." She laughed softly. "You are paranoid." "Maybe," I said, "but I document everything." The line went quiet. After we hung up, I returned to the warehouse. I stood in the center of the space and looked at the rows of furniture. My mother had not argued in her final months. She had prepared, quietly, legally. Arguing would not protect anything. Documentation would. Proof would. If Camille made another move, I would make sure every step was recorded, and when the time came, I would not stop her. I would let her walk into it.
Chapter 4: The Trap. Preparations stopped being theoretical in January 2024. I hired a commercial security contractor named Darren Cole, who handled installations across Middle Tennessee. We met at the warehouse on a cold morning while he inspected the doors and corners of the building. "How much coverage do you want?" he asked. "All of it," I said. Within a week, 4 exterior 4K cameras were mounted high along the brick. Motion-activated floodlights covered the side entrance and loading door. The original lock was replaced with a reinforced industrial alloy muzzle. The system fed directly to my phone and to a monitoring center that could dispatch law enforcement. Installation cost just under $1,400. Monthly monitoring was $62. Cheap compared to what was inside. The legal layer came next. I drafted a certified letter formally notifying Camille that she was not authorized to access the warehouse under any circumstance. It referenced the recorded deed and warned that forced entry would result in criminal charges. I mailed it return receipt requested. When the confirmation card came back signed in her handwriting, I slid it into my binder. After that, I documented everything. January 8th. Camille's SUV parked across from the industrial park. January 15th. A neighboring tenant reported a woman asking about my schedule. January 23rd. Camille suggested we share access to avoid tension. February 1st. My father mentioned I should consider being more flexible. 36 entries over 6 weeks. At dinner one night, Camille smiled across the table. "You are still guarding that warehouse like a fortress," she said. "It is my property," I replied. Daniel shifted in his chair. "Elise, maybe compromise would help." "Compromise on ownership?" I asked. "We are family," Camille said. "Family does not require unauthorized access." Her smile faded briefly. That was when I knew she would escalate. I told everyone I was traveling to Atlanta for a compliance conference. I left a small suitcase by my front door for appearances. Instead, I coordinated with Detective Morgan Alvarez at the Nashville Metro Police Department. I brought her my binder, the certified letter, the camera receipts, and my incident log. She reviewed it quietly. "If she forces entry after documented notice, that is attempted burglary," she said. "If she presents forged paperwork, that is a separate offense." On the morning of March 12th, I sat in her office with the live camera feed open on a tablet. At 10:14 a.m., my phone vibrated. "She just pulled in," Darren texted. The silver SUV rolled into view. Camille stepped out wearing a cream blazer and sunglasses. She looked calm. She opened her trunk and lifted out bolt cutters. Detective Alvarez leaned forward. "She knows she is not authorized." Camille walked to the side door, tested the handle, then positioned the cutter around the steel lock. The floodlights snapped on. She squeezed. Metal snapped. The silent alarm triggered. 8 minutes later, 2 patrol cars entered the lot. Through the camera feed, I watched officers approach her. "What are you doing here, ma'am?" one asked. "I have authorization," she replied, pulling a document from her purse. By the time Detective Alvarez and I arrived, Camille was holding up the paper. "I have power of attorney," she said. "I am legally permitted to access this property." The officer looked at the document. "It states you have authorization from Elise Carter."
I am Elise Carter, I said. For a split second, her composure faltered. Detective Alvarez examined the paper. "Is this your signature?" she asked. No. The signature resembled mine, but it was not mine. "This appears to be forged," Detective Alvarez said calmly. "Presenting forged authorization is a criminal offense." Camille's voice sharpened. "You are overreacting. This is family business." "No," I said. "You cut a lock." When the officer placed her hands behind her back, she did not look frightened. She looked furious. The cuffs clicked shut. For the first time since she entered our lives, she had lost control. Daniel arrived shortly after, confusion written across his face. "What is happening?" he demanded. "She set me up," Camille said quickly. I held up the binder. She was formally notified not to enter. She forced entry and presented forged paperwork. Detective Alvarez addressed him evenly. "Sir, your wife has been detained for attempted burglary and suspected forgery. We will also investigate possible financial fraud." Camille was placed into the patrol car. 72 hours later, Detective Alvarez called again. "We executed a search warrant at your father's residence." "What did you find?" "Another power of attorney. This one grants Camille full financial control over Daniel's retirement accounts and authority to open lines of credit." My stomach dropped. "It was notarized," she continued, "dated 2 weeks ago." 2 weeks. If processed, that document would have allowed her to withdraw funds from his 401k and open a home equity line on the house. "This falls under potential elder financial exploitation," Detective Alvarez said. She hadn't been after the warehouse. She had been positioning for everything. That evening, Daniel sat across from me in the quiet living room. "She told me it was standard estate paperwork," he said softly. "Simplifying things." "You were going to sign it?" I asked. "It was on the counter," he admitted. "I had not yet." He looked at me, eyes glassy. "If you had not kept records—" He did not finish the sentence. For the first time, he did not accuse me of overreacting. For the first time, he understood how close he had come. Chapter 5. Karma has a balance sheet. The consequences did not arrive with shouting. They arrived with court dates. Camille's bail was set at $40,000. No one paid it. She remained in county custody while the criminal investigation expanded. Attempted burglary, forgery, financial fraud. The notarized power of attorney became central to what prosecutors began calling a financial exploitation case. 3 weeks after the arrest, Detective Morgan Alvarez called again. "We reopened an Arizona file," she said, "a prior complaint involving similar conduct." The name attached to that complaint was Andrew Keller, 72 at the time, a retired contractor in Tucson. Savings depleted. A home equity line opened under questionable circumstances. The case had stalled years earlier without enough evidence for court sentencing. This time, there was a pattern. Andrew agreed to speak to investigators. Patterns rarely survive once exposed. My father faced consequences as well. Because he had permitted Camille to present herself as having access to shared financial matters, and because he had nearly signed a sweeping estate document without independent review, the court examined his role in enabling the situation. His attorney negotiated carefully. In the end, he avoided criminal charges, but accepted 18 months of supervised probation tied to financial oversight negligence. He was ordered to complete 200 hours of community service and mandatory financial literacy counseling. It was not prison. It was accountability. His 401k account remained temporarily frozen during the investigation. The fraudulent power of attorney was declared invalid.
The attempt to establish a home equity line was halted before funds were released. The house stayed in his name. The warehouse remains untouched. In February 2025, a judge granted an annulment based on fraud and material deception. The marriage was legally voided. No spousal support, no division of retirement assets, no settlement. Camille walked away with nothing. The woman who once spent $6,800 on wellness retreats could not produce $40,000 for bail. Financial karma has a balance sheet. It records every withdrawal. It records every signature. And it balances. One afternoon in March 2025, I drove my father to the warehouse. He had not been back since the day of the arrest. The air inside still carried the scent of polish and cedar. The rows of restored furniture stood exactly where my mother left them. He moved slowly between the pieces. "She did all of this," he said, almost to himself. "Yes," I replied, "over 22 years." He stopped in front of a teak lounge chair she restored in 2009. I remembered her sanding that frame for hours, refusing shortcuts. He lowered himself into it carefully. "I almost lost all of this," he said. "It was not just this," I said quietly. "It was your retirement, the house, everything." He pressed his hands together and stared at the floor. "I wanted to believe I was not alone after she died," he said. "I ignored things I should have questioned." "You were grieving," I answered. "Grief makes patterns harder to see." He looked up at me, eyes wet. "You were not overreacting," he said. "You were protecting us." That was the moment the anger dissolved. Probation changed him. He completed his community service hours at a nonprofit workshop restoring donated furniture for families transitioning out of shelters. For the first time, he experienced the labor behind each refinished surface. He began to understand the years my mother poured into that building. I made my own decision. In the summer of 2025, I signed a lease on a small front store in East Nashville. The sign above the door read, "Eleanor's Restoration," not as a tribute, as a continuation. I moved 10 pieces from the warehouse into the shop and rotated inventory carefully. Customers walked in looking for mid-century design. They left hearing stories about craftsmanship, patience, and value hidden beneath neglect. I did not tell them about bolt cutters or forged signatures. I did not tell them about notarized deception. But every sale carried proof that documentation and preparation preserved something larger than furniture. Some evenings, I still sit alone in the warehouse after closing the shop. The cameras remain. The floodlights activate at motion. The lock is stronger than ever. Not because I expect another break-in, because I learned what happens when you ignore evidence. Camille believed I was guarding square footage. She believed the fight was about property. She never understood that I was guarding leverage, documentation, proof. I did not win by screaming. I won by documenting. She did not destroy us. She exposed what needed protection. If you've ever been told that you are imagining patterns, that you are too emotional, that you are overreacting, pause and document. Patterns do not tighten without reason. And if this story resonated with you, stay here. There are more stories about how women protect their legacy when no one else sees the risk. Camille thought I was guarding a warehouse. In truth, I was guarding evidence. Because paper doesn't panic, and proof always outlasts persuasion.